Have you ever seen a bad mobile game ad and then just wondered, what the heck am I looking at?
Это сильное кино.
Maybe you saw an ad that was misleading
Let's try to help him in other ways. He dropped. No, be careful with the...
or hypersexualized, or made with really low production value.
No, you can't just go and conquer the world.
Haha, warboat go brrrrrr.
Or maybe it was just over the top and really clickbaity. Well, you're not alone. In fact, there are entire online communities like the subreddit Shitty Mobile Game Ads that poke fun and highlight this unfortunate trend of mobile game ads that just plain suck. Well, as someone who works in the mobile marketing industry, I've seen a ton of these bad ads, and admittedly, I've even worked on some of them. So I think I have a unique perspective into the behind the scenes of what actually goes on. It's not actually just as simple as, hey, this company doesn't care, although in some cases that might actually just be the reason. So it's my hope in this video to give an insider perspective and shine a light on a lot of the trends and actual technical reasons that this is the case. I'll break down what's actually driving advertisers and mobile gaming companies to produce ads this way. And I think you'll actually be surprised by some of the reasons. I want to clarify that even though I work on mobile game advertising, I'm not trying to justify these things. I'm actually just trying to explain why it happens and actually just educate folks on what they should be looking out for. So with that said, I've jotted down a long list of reasons why mobile game ads suck, and we'll just start running right through them. This list is not in any particular order, but one reason is a lot of mobile game ads are intentionally misleading. This is when the gameplay shown in the ad actually has nothing to do with what's actually in the app once you download it. So I'll just give a egregious hypothetical example. Let's say the game I'm trying to market is Tetris, and rather than run Tetris looking ads, I run an ad that has a Rubik's Cube, and I just slap Tetris on it, and a lot of people install the game, and it turns out there's nothing to do with Rubik's Cubes, it's all Tetris gameplay. While that sounds like a pretty unreasonable thing to do, this is something that actually happens in a lot of mobile games. So I'll give you another example, that's actually a real example. You might see an ad that has a tower defense mechanic being displayed. Once you install the game, you realize that this is actually a city builder game. It has nothing to do with tower defense, but the advertiser still decided to show a mechanic that didn't exist in the actual game. We also see this with a lot of puzzle elements being used in ad creative. For example, it might be like a cut the rope type thing, or pull the lever, or try to free this person from this scenario. There's a lot of these clickbaity mechanics used in the ad that actually don't exist in the game. So this is plain misleading, and the reason advertisers do this is to expand their audience. You often see this with big games or older games. So let's take, for example, a city builder game that's been out for a few years. They've done really well, they've run a lot of advertising, and they've saturated their core market. So at this point, they still want to grow, but they know that if they keep showing city building mechanics in their ad, they're just going to reach the same types of folks, and people have already seen this ad, and it's not exciting anymore. So in an attempt to draw new players in, the advertiser might just show off a non-existent game mechanic that speaks to a new pool of consumers. So this one, again, is just, it's plain misleading. There is some gray area in this one where certain games might have a small mechanic that's, say, like 5% of the gameplay, but they'll show it off in the ad as if it were like half or a big part of the gameplay. Ultimately, it's just advertisers trying to respin their game to reach new audiences. Another trend you'll see a lot is the same type of ad or the same concept being duplicated and mimicked across different games. This is a case where mobile game companies are copying their competitors and trying to dovetail onto the same trend. Some context here is that the mobile game ads ecosystem is highly competitive. All of the top mobile game advertisers have a very close pulse to what creatives their competitors are running. And a big reason for that is most mobile game advertisers use the same tools to gauge and scope out their competition. For example, Facebook Ads Library is a super powerful tool that's available to anyone. You can go right now to any company's Facebook page and see a catalog of a lot of their ads that are actually out in the wild right now. There are also more sophisticated tools like App Annie and Sensor Tower, which are App Store intelligence tools. And these tools give information like revenue and install projections for individual apps, as well as catalogs of actual ads that they've seen in the wild. So that means that advertisers can see what ads other people are running, and at the same time know which ones are performing better. Therefore, when it comes to a mobile game company to decide what type of ad to run next, they're just going to look at what's working for their competitors and try to copy that. So what you get from that is the same type of ad being duplicated across different games. Another thing to call out is that some of these ads just plain look bad. They're made with really low production value. And I think an important call out here is that the creative production philosophy for mobile game ads is almost fundamentally flip-flopped from your traditional, say, TV ads. Because of the highly competitive nature of ad auctions on Facebook and Google, mobile game ads are made at scale, and it's mostly a quantity over quality play. Advertisers are just trying to optimize for that extra decimal point of increased conversion. And what you get as a result of that is that each individual ad concept gets a very, very short lifespan. It's conventionally accepted that almost 9 out of 10 mobile game ads fail, meaning advertisers are only spending a few $100s to have these ads run before they run out of steam and are killed forever. Contrast that with TV ads, where production is a lot more about quality over quantity. Oftentimes, advertisers on TV are spending tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars per commercial. And of course, when you do that, the production value on TV is going to skyrocket in proportion to the amount of money you're spending to make that ad. It's not unusual for mobile game ads to be dirt cheap to produce. For example, a mobile game video ad might take a few hundred to a few $1,000s to create on the low end, and at most maybe tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of $1,000s in the rare cases like a heavily CGI driven trailer like a Clash of Clans. The other thing to note is that a lot of these mobile game advertisers are quite small and they just don't have the deep pockets to pay for these high production value ads. So what you get in turn is trying to optimize down to the cheapest delivery. Oftentimes mobile game advertisers are contracting out the ad production work to third parties. So it's also not unusual to see the same creative agencies making mobile game ads for a lot of the big advertisers out there. So it makes sense that if you have a small pool of creative agencies making ads for a lot of the mobile games out there, then you're going to see a lot of the same design elements repeated again and again. An example of one of these trends is the finger or hand overlay that you see a lot of these mobile gaming apps. This is a case where as soon as one advertiser finds success with it, that becomes best practice and everybody starts to adopt the same thing. Another important reason to note is the context of where mobile game ads are served and how that influences them to be super clickbaity. We're all obviously aware that the trend with online content is clickbaitiness, and that is certainly the case with mobile game ads. The majority of mobile game ads are served on Facebook, Google, or as an interstitial or rewarded video within other mobile apps. With placements like Facebook newsfeed or Instagram stories, advertisers need to stop folks from scrolling and capture their attention. Otherwise, they instantly lose their prospective audience. Contrast that with TV, for example, where when you watch a TV commercial, you're effectively part of a captive audience. Advertisers can counter the fact that you're likely going to see the entirety of, say, a 30-second commercial, and within that 30 seconds, they're able to tell a full story or have some sort of narrative going on. Well, that's certainly not the case with mobile gaming, and really just digital advertising in general. If you're trying to capture the attention of someone scrolling through their newsfeed, you have to get them instantly, within the first few seconds at least if you're showing a video. And that drastically affects the way stories are told through mobile game advertising. In fact, a lot of times advertisers just try to abandon the story or just break it down to something really simple, really clickbaity, so that it jumps off the page. Essentially, every single mobile game advertiser out there is optimizing their first 5 seconds or so of their videos. They know they can't afford to have any sort of build up. They just have to have something clickbaity and something that drives conversions from the get-go. And as long as it's the case that advertisers have to compete for that just few seconds of time to grab someone's attention, ads are going to continuously be optimized in this manner. And that kind of takes me to my next reason, where mobile game ads, it's all about performance over brand. In other words, it's all about the quantitative over the qualitative. And nowadays, you get plenty of data about user engagement on ads that you can optimize small elements like button color or object placement within an ad. Advertisers are using this data to intentionally influence the way people engage with the ad itself. For example, advertisers have a choice. Do they want to drive a higher CTR or click-through rate, which means that top of funnel engagement, or do they want to drive something that's lower funnel like retention? Like I mentioned before, advertisers are trying to get these decimal point increases on ad performance because when you look at the numbers at scale, 0.2% actually makes a pretty big difference when you're talking about $100,000 or $1 million in ad spend. And so a lot of times, decisions about what types of creative concepts to pursue are purely driven by the numbers and not by any sort of qualitative metric. They're not necessarily looking at what type of comments people are leaving on the Facebook ad or what people are saying about the ad. They're looking at who is actually installing, who's actually retaining and monetizing. And that is going to inform what types of ads are being made. And on the topic of brand equity takes on a different shape when it comes to mobile games. So you might be wondering, if this mobile game keeps running bad ads, isn't the company worried about how people are going to perceive the game? Well, sometimes not really. This is because oftentimes in the mobile gaming sphere, we're talking about original IP or just the lack of IP or intellectual property, or we're looking at small companies that just don't have to worry about their brand at all. That's why when it comes to recognizable franchises on mobile titles, such as your Pokemon or your NBA or NFL games, or even your Marvel games, Star Wars games, these titles still maintain their brand integrity on mobile because the same standards that are being applied on their console games, on their TV shows and movies, are being applied across the board. That's not the case for a lot of original mobile IP. They don't have to worry about these stringent brand guidelines, and they have sort of free reign to do whatever they want when it comes to ad testing and exploration. For example, I've worked on some titles that have original IP where there's actually just no brand team, there's no brand Bible or no brand guidelines, and it's almost a free-for-all. The directive for a lot of these companies is go out and make ads that deliver users, that deliver revenue. It doesn't really matter what you put out there as long as it works. Another thing to pay attention to when it comes to mobile ads is that you are probably not the target audience for that specific ad that you're seeing. For a lot of mobile games, it's a whale-driven economy, meaning that a very, very small percentage of players are driving a very, very large percentage of the overall revenue for that title. In fact, the mobile gaming industry payer rate is about 1 to 2% actually. Payer rate being defined as the percentage of players who actually spend any money at all within the game. So that means for a well-driven game, 99% of folks aren't spending a dime. They might be installing the game and uninstalling it on the first day. So chances are you are probably not the target audience for this ad that you might be seeing. One caveat though is that that's not necessarily true all the time for casual games. There's a big portion of games that aren't well-driven or that don't even monetize off in-app purchases. Rather, they might monetize off serving ads themselves in the games. An example of that might be the game Adventure Capitalist, where they're not necessarily targeting some high value user. They just want to bring in a broad audience, anyone they can, to look at ads within the game. So the next time you see an ad that feels super niche, that doesn't speak to you at all, know that it might not be designed to work on you, but it could very well work on somebody else. Moving on to another reason, a lot of these mobile game ads aren't really well localized. There might be a lot of grammar mistakes or just awkward wording.
Hi, Rico. Got up so early, huh?
What? You are changing your house? Oh, that's not good. How is it now?
Rest assured, we've got it covered.
And there are two main factors that contribute to this. With the cost to make mobile games relatively low compared to, say, console or PC, you have publishers coming in from all over the world trying to target an English-speaking audience. And in some of these cases, they might not have the budget to properly localize the game, much less the ads themselves. So you might be seeing some ads that have some awkward wording or spelling mistakes. Another reason is that even if you have a properly localized ad, if you don't have good copywriters, the terminology and the language used within an ad might seem awkward and uncomfortable. This is a case with ad copy where if you do it right, it goes unnoticed, and if you do it wrong, people will absolutely notice. The next reason is limited targeting ability for advertisers. This is one where I'm going to defend advertisers a little bit, so bear with me. But as advertisers, we want to show the right ad to the right person. For example, if it's a shooter title, we don't really want to show that shooter title to someone who only plays Candy Crush or super casual games, because if we show them the ad, it's going to be super irrelevant and they're just going to click away. But the reality with ad targeting nowadays is that it's algorithmically driven by Facebook and Google and a lot of the ad platforms themselves, meaning that advertisers oftentimes don't have direct levers to say who they want to target. And as an advertiser, your targeting levers might be as specific as only country and language. You might also just input your target goal. For example, a lot of advertisers will optimize to a ROAS or a CPA, and in turn, Facebook and Google take these numbers and apply their own targeting levers to it. Usually the ad platforms start by showing ads to a broad audience and then start optimizing it down to a narrow audience. So that means that even if you have a very niche product or a niche game that you're trying to show off, your ad might just be shown to a bunch of people that you don't even want it to be shown to. And when you have that mismatch, people are going to complain and they're not going to have a great experience. So a lot of this is a question of how tightly advertisers can match their intended audience to their ads. And a lot of times it's outside of the advertiser's direct control and more a matter of a broader targeting question for the platforms themselves. And that ties into my last reason here. Sometimes you just see the same ad way too many times. As an advertiser, I've gotten complaints for people seeing the same ad of ours again and again and again on their Facebook newsfeed or their YouTube pre-roll ad. And going back to the platform algorithms, this is the algorithm at work. Most advertisers don't actually have the ability to limit the amount of times that someone can see their ad within a day. We call this frequency capping. Usually that's controlled by the platform themselves, like Facebook and Google. These social media giants are inclined to protect their user experience, and you would think that they'd limit the amount of times you can see an ad. But sometimes that doesn't always work. And I'll also give two opposite examples of why you might be seeing the same ad again and again. If Facebook identifies you as a high value customer or someone who really fits a certain advertiser's profile, then you might get spammed again and again with an ad because they really want you to be matched with this certain advertiser. And on the other hand, the ad networks are motivated to spend as much of their advertisers' money as possible. So if Facebook wants to get as much money from, say, the X mobile game company, they're going to try to show this ad as much as possible to anyone. And lastly, if you think about all the touch points there are within the mobile app ecosystem, you might be seeing an ad for a certain title on Facebook, and then on YouTube, and then on Instagram, and then within another mobile app. There are so many ways for advertisers to reach you that sometimes it just gets really, really exhausting. So we've run through a bunch of different reasons, and I hope it gives a sense of some of the big trends within mobile advertising that affects the way that mobile ads themselves are built. And lastly, I just have to admit that as an advertiser myself, I violated a lot of these things that I've just mentioned before. I've tried to reflect on a lot of this stuff and just remember that as somebody who's a gamer myself, as somebody who wants to preserve a good experience for people when it comes to ads, that it's up to a lot of us as advertisers to just do better. My hope is that a lot of advertisers will start to realize that brand equity and just brand perception really matters and actually is very closely tied to performance. So I'm hoping that this video helps folks understand some of the trends behind advertising and be better equipped to notice and call out some of these things as they see them. So there you have it.